Just days after the mass shooting at the Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, the NRA gathered 275 miles away in Houston for their annual convention. Speakers included Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Senator Ted Cruz, and former President Trump. This was their message.
There are thousands of laws on the books across the country that limit the owning or using of firearms. Laws that have not stopped madmen from carrying out evil acts on innocent people in peaceful communities.
When Joe Biden blamed the gun lobby, he was talking about Americans like you. As always, in the wake of these tragedies, the various gun control policies being pushed by the left would have done nothing to prevent the horror that took place. Absolutely nothing.
We must not react to evil and tragedy by abandoning the Constitution or infringing on the rights of our law-abiding citizens.
With me now is Richard Feldman, a former NRA lobbyist and the president of the Independent Firearm Owners Association. He's also the author of Ricochet, Confessions of a Gun Lobbyist. Richard, thanks for being with us. You're no longer with the NRA. What role did you specifically play in what the NRA has become today in terms of the role of pushing Republican leaders to be completely inflexible on gun control?
Well, I didn't play any role in that. When I was at NRA in the 1980s, it was a far more bipartisan organization. In fact, the CEO that hired me at the time, Wayne LaPierre's predecessor, was a Democrat who had been appointed by Lyndon Johnson to head the Border Patrol. So it was a very different organization at the time.
And how do you account for where things stand today, where it is almost like a GOP convention with some of the major figures of the party speaking there? We saw a video just yesterday of Trump sort of dancing around a little bit on stage after his speech was over, in what was kind of a celebratory atmosphere, and there's all sort of repeating the same NRA talking points. How did it become this stronghold inside the GOP?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for it, but we've become so partisan on so many issues. Oddly enough, in the last 20 years or so, when I've spoken around the country, I find that when you ask the right question, the American people don't have much to argue about. And I know that sounds strange, but I've never met a gun owner or a non-gun owner that thinks it's a good idea for dangerous, mentally challenged individuals to have access to guns, violent predatory criminals, or unsupervised juveniles. So our fight is really about the politics of this issue, not the policy. And there are things we could do very quickly, and there are things that we really need to think out, because it's better to have a good strategy well executed than to run off half-cocked and do things that don't work. For starters, both shooters in the last 2 weeks were 18 years old when they legally bought their guns. We don't allow 18-year-olds to buy a beer or a glass of wine, and yet they can legally purchase a long gun, but not a handgun. When Congress reconvenes, we could change that very quickly and raise the age of buying a long gun to 21, at least till we think this out. I'd also urge the president to start really a national mass shooting task force, because there are a lot of good ideas. There are a lot of ideas that have unintended consequences. We need to think out, because it is complicated, it is multi-jurisdictional and multi-dimensional, and we need to be thoughtful about how we proceed and what we do. But we used to be, at least, a very smart country. We were able to go to the moon. We can do it again if we set our minds to it and we go about it in an organized, intelligent fashion.
The head of the NRA right now is Wayne LaPierre. He spoke last night. Let's listen to what he had to say and talk about it.
Restricting the fundamental human right of law-abiding Americans to defend themselves is not the answer. It never has been. the NRA will never ever stop fighting for the right of the innocent and the law-abiding to defend themselves against the evil criminal element that plagues our society. Because we know there can be no freedom, no security, no safety without the right of the law-abiding to bear arms for self-defense.
You say the current NRA leadership undermines not only common sense solutions, but also the interests of its own members. What role, should the NRA be playing in all of this? It seems like what the role that they play is just obstruct everything.
Well, once again, they're kind of hooked on the politics of the issue. And after all, they're not elected officials. We have to look to Congress. It's Congress's responsibility and our state legislatures to take this issue and look at it carefully. There are a lot of suggestions being thrown out there. But one thing I'm certain of, if we vilify and demonize the 100 million firearm owners in this country that didn't misuse their guns, we're going to have the same gridlock that we always end up with up to now after any of these horrible shootings. We're in agreement, after all, on who shouldn't have firearms. And yet we allow the things we disagree about to prevent us from moving forward on the things we're in agreement with. It's time to stop that. And I asked the president to do what he can and set up this commission. And let's do this.
But I have
in
to
a
ask you,
smart
Richard,
way.
I hear what you're saying, but it seems to me you can ask the president to set up a commission, you can plead with lawmakers to pass legislation, but the NRA time and again puts money in the campaign coffers of Republican politicians. We were analyzing this earlier in this program, where 100% of all of their contributions go to Republican politicians, and because of the filibuster in the Senate, things don't go anywhere. And I just have to ask,
Sure.
what do you think of that reality of the situation? And I guess the overall question that I would have is, wouldn't this country be better off without an NRA?
Money doesn't vote. People vote. And if you talk about getting rid of an organization that you disagree with, like the NRA, you're talking about the First Amendment. There are lots of organizations I disagree with. I wish they didn't exist. But freedom is the right to have all these voices out there. And in our democracy, we allow people to articulate their perspectives, their points of view. And if they're successful at getting enough people to support their candidates, they win. Now,
no, I understand all that. All of these organizations have a right to exist and say what they want to say. But I have to ask, sir, you used to work for the NRA. You were a lobbyist for them. Do you wish that you had never worked for the NRA? I mean, it seems to me, and I think a lot of people agree with this, they are the biggest impediment to getting anything done on this issue in terms of stopping mass shootings in this country.
Well, then we disagree on that. I think we're focused on the wrong spot. I also ran the Firearm Industries Association after NRA, and I'm responsible for getting child safety locks included in every firearm that's shipped in America. Now, that didn't exactly endear me at the time to NRA's leadership. So we parted company on some things, but the NRA doesn't have a lock. The power on this issue isn't in the money. The power is with the people. Barney Frank wrote about it in his book. He always has said that what the NRA has done so well is using the tools of democracy to get what their membership wants. But their membership
but if the tools
doesn't
of
want guns
democracy
in the
grind
hands
to
of
a halt
crazy
because of
people.
the filibuster, if the tools of democracy grind to a halt because of the filibuster, and you have a certain number of Republican senators in the Senate who are unwilling to negotiate on the issue because they are recipients of campaign contributions from the NRA, and they have been for years, and they don't want to do away with that. Don't you agree, sir, that that's a problem?
It's a problem when I don't like the outcome. It's a benefit when I do. So it's really outcome determinative. And it's not just Republicans. There's several Democrats in the Senate After all, the Senate is controlled
Not that
by
many.
the Democrats.
Well, they only,
So-
but sir, they only have 50 votes. You need 60 votes to get past the filibuster.
And if the Republicans were to control the Senate after this year's election, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Democrats going, boy, having a filibuster isn't such a bad idea after all.
All right, Richard Feldman, thank you very much for your time. We've got to move on to the next thing, but thanks for spending time with us. We appreciate it.
You bet.
We're back in a moment.